you mentioned earlier that the conference wants to look at different ways to tailor mindfulness to fit the South African country,
the context, yes.
What we have here, isn't the same as maybe what a European country would have.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Well, we don't know yet. That's why partly why we're having the conference is to ask the question. And I think a good question goes a long way. And if we come into a conference of this nature with an answer, then it's dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. And it also shuts down the conversation. It says, well, we're having it, but we actually already know what we're going to do. So we want to ask the question, is it relevant? Is it relevant in the nature of a multilingual, multicultural society? If it's relevant, how is it relevant? And do we, in fact, need to adapt it in this context? That's actually the question, rather than how we're going to adapt it, is how we're going to approach the question.
Well, do you think it's relevant?
Well, I've a lot of the work that I've done teaching mindfulness has been to middle-class people, and it's highly relevant there. So we often talk about communities, and we immediately go, well, community equals somebody who's poor. A community, there are multiple levels and kinds of community, but certainly in that layer of the society, it's enormously valuable. And there's a huge amount of evidence to support that. I've done some work, and I know a number of my colleagues have been doing pilot projects in more impoverished community who are less resourced, under-resourced, and they've adapted mindfulness in very clever ways to make the practices more accessible, to shift the language so that it's not alienating. I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday who works with parents in the townships, and teaching them very simple ways of parenting using mindfulness, but they don't even use the word mindfulness. They just say, can you pay attention to the activity that your child is doing while he's doing it? Now, if you remember the definition, it's about paying attention in the present moment. That's mindfulness. They don't necessarily tell people specifically, oh, you're going to do this thing called mindfulness. They just
we're going to be very mindful.
Yeah, we're going to be mindful, and immediately it shuts people down, or it even alienates. So that's a wonderful example of teaching parents to engage with their children with more attention. Working in impoverished communities in the most simple ways. I remember this very poignant story of working in, I didn't do it, it was another colleague who was working in rural KwaZulu-Natal, where the HIV/AIDS rates are enormously high, and there are a lot of orphaned children, there are a lot of other family members who are having to take care of young children, taking care of children, which is tragic. And there was a young mother who was being taught these practices, and she had very, very little in the way of material possessions. And she described this very simple act of washing her baby with sunlight soap and using a mindfulness practice, which is just to simply feel the experience of washing her child. And she described how poignant and how powerful and how beautiful it was, and how it connected her with her baby, because she was actually present with the experience. It's that mindfulness in everyday life, in the ordinary, simple activities of everyday life. That's where I think that's my sense of where we're going to get a lot of traction. There's so much trauma, there's so much stress and distress. If we try and ameliorate it to a high degree, we're probably going to fail. But in between those moments are the ordinary, everyday acts of life, the acts of living. And if we can actually show up for them, they actually start to vitalize in front of us and become more meaningful.